My name is Alexandra Kane, and I spent 5 years watching my marriage slowly crumble while my mother-in-law, Helen, smiled and offered sympathetic advice. My husband Marcus became distant, critical, convinced I wasn't the right partner for him, and I couldn't understand why the man who once loved me so completely had transformed into someone who could barely stand to be in the same room with me. The change in Marcus started so gradually that I didn't notice it at first. Small comments about how I dressed, how I spoke to his friends, and how I managed our home. Nothing overtly cruel, just a constant drip of criticism that slowly eroded my confidence. He'd come home from work tense, pick fights over minor things, then apologize later, claiming stress from his job. But it escalated. He started spending more time away from home, claiming business dinners and networking events. He'd check his phone constantly, smile at messages I wasn't allowed to see, and grow defensive when I asked questions. Helen, my mother-in-law, was there through all of it, sympathetic, concerned, always available to listen when I called her crying. "Marriage is hard, dear," she'd say. "Sometimes people grow apart. Maybe you need to give him space." She'd visit our house regularly, always bringing homemade meals, always asking how things were going, always looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or satisfaction masquerading as concern. Marcus started mentioning a woman from work, Olivia. At first, just casually. She'd helped with a project. She had good ideas, she was easy to work with. Then more frequently, Olivia thought this. Olivia suggested that. Olivia understood his career ambitions in ways I apparently didn't. "Maybe you should invite her to dinner," Helen suggested one Sunday afternoon when Marcus complained I didn't understand the pressures of his job. "It might help Alexandra understand your world better if she met your colleagues." So Olivia came to dinner. She was beautiful, successful, articulate, everything I felt I wasn't. She and Marcus talked about work with an ease I'd never been able to match. Helen watched them interact with obvious approval, then looked at me like I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. After Olivia left, Marcus was quiet. "Then, she gets it, my job, my stress, my goals. I don't know why you can't be more like her." I felt something break inside me. "Are you having an affair?" "No," Marcus said, but he hesitated just slightly too long. "But I've been thinking maybe we rushed into this marriage. Maybe we weren't as compatible as we thought." Helen called the next day to check on me. Her voice was warm, maternal. "I heard you and Marcus are having difficulties. I'm so sorry, dear. You know I care about you both. If there's anything I can do. Did he tell you he wants a divorce?" I asked, my voice hollow. "He mentioned he was confused about the relationship," Helen said carefully. "Alexandra, I don't want to overstep, but sometimes when people are unhappy, it's kinder to let them go. Holding on too tight can make things worse." She was encouraging me to give up, to make the divorce easier for Marcus. I thanked her for the advice and hung up, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. Marcus was out again, another business dinner, and I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. My laptop was on the nightstand, and I opened it absently, not really intending to do anything specific. Marcus had left his email open on my browser. He must have checked it earlier and forgotten to log out. I knew I should close it, respect his privacy, but I couldn't. I needed to understand what was happening to my marriage. I started scrolling through his inbox, found normal work emails, spam, and newsletters. Then I saw a folder labeled Life Coach, something I'd never heard Marcus mention. I opened it. The folder contained hundreds of emails from an address I didn't recognize, email protected. The emails went back 3 years, starting just 6 months after our wedding. I opened the first one. "Marcus, you seem like someone who's destined for great things, but I noticed in our conversation that you might be held back by certain personal circumstances. Sometimes we make life decisions too quickly and then feel trapped by them. I wanted to reach out privately to see if you'd be interested in some guidance about identifying and overcoming obstacles to your success." I felt my stomach drop. Our conversation. When had this person talked to Marcus? The email was signed "Only a concerned friend." I opened more emails. The pattern was chilling. This anonymous life coach had spent 3 years systematically convincing Marcus that I was the obstacle to his success, that our marriage was holding him back, that he deserved someone who better understood his ambitions. The emails were sophisticated, manipulative, perfectly calibrated to exploit Marcus's insecurities and ambitions. They'd start with compliments, then subtle suggestions that he wasn't living up to his potential, then pointed observations about how his wife didn't support his goals. You mentioned your wife doesn't understand why you need to network on weekends. That must be frustrating for someone with your drive. Have you noticed how your career trajectory slowed after marriage? Sometimes partnerships drain our energy rather than enhance it. There are women who would celebrate your ambition rather than resent it. Don't you deserve that kind of support? Then, about a year ago, the emails started specifically mentioning Olivia. I've noticed you work well with Olivia from accounting. She seems to understand professional dedication in a way your wife doesn't. Have you considered that compatibility at work might indicate deeper compatibility? Olivia mentioned to me that she thinks you're very talented. It's nice when someone recognizes your worth, isn't it? Wait. Olivia mentioned to me. This anonymous emailer knew Olivia personally, had talked to her about Marcus. I kept reading, my hand shaking. The emails became more explicit in their suggestions. Your wife is threatened by your success because she can't match it. That's why she doesn't understand. Olivia represents what you could have instead of settling for someone who holds you back. Divorce isn't failure. It's recognizing that you've outgrown a relationship that no longer serves your evolution. Successful men often need to make difficult choices about their personal lives. Olivia would make an excellent partner for someone at your level. I've gotten to know her well, and I think you two would be very compatible. Perhaps you should explore that possibility. Who was this person? How did they know both Marcus and Olivia? How had they been manipulating my husband for 3 years without me knowing? Then I found an email from 6 months ago that made everything click into place. Marcus, this is Helen. I think it's time I told you that I've been the one sending these emails. I created the anonymous account because I didn't think you'd listen if you knew it was your mother. But I need you to understand I am doing this because I love you, and I can see what you wanted. Alexandra is wrong for you. She's limiting your potential. Olivia is the woman you should be with. I've been cultivating a friendship with her specifically because I knew she'd be perfect for you. Trust me, son. I'm only trying to help you have the life you deserve. My mother-in-law Helen had been secretly emailing my husband for 3 years, systematically destroying our marriage and grooming another woman to replace me, all while pretending to be supportive, concerned, and sympathetic to both of us. I kept scrolling, and the emails after her revelation became even more explicit. I've told Olivia about your marital problems. She's very sympathetic and interested in supporting you through this difficult time. Remember, once you're divorced, you'll need someone who understands you. I've made sure Olivia is ready to be that person. Alexandra will try to save the marriage when you ask for a divorce. Don't let her manipulate you. You deserve happiness, and that means being with Olivia. Helen hadn't just encouraged divorce, she'd orchestrated the entire thing, including selecting and preparing my replacement. But there was something else in that folder. Emails that went beyond just my marriage, references to Helen's previous project and past successes, mentions of Marcus's father, Helen's late husband, and how that situation worked out perfectly. I opened a document attached to one of the emails. It was labeled Family History Confidential. What I read made me realize that destroying my marriage wasn't Helen's first manipulation. It wasn't even her worst. The document was a detailed journal Helen had kept, written like a business plan, outlining decades of calculated manipulations. She'd started with Marcus's father, Daniel. They'd married when Helen was 22, and according to her journal, she'd spent the first 3 years of marriage systematically isolating Daniel from his family and friends. Anonymous letters were sent to his parents, claiming Helen was being abused. Forged emails made it appear his friends were talking badly about him. Gradual erosion of every relationship except the one with her. Then, once Daniel was completely dependent on her, she'd taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on him, forging his signature, and staged an accident. Daniel had died in a house fire when Marcus was 5 years old. The fire investigation had ruled it accidental. Faulty wiring in the basement. But Helen's journal described in detail how she'd deliberately frayed the wires, waited for Daniel to go down to the basement alone, then trapped him there while the fire started. She'd collected the insurance money and raised Marcus alone, using the funds to maintain a comfortable lifestyle while playing the grieving widow. But it didn't stop there. The journal mentioned 2 other marriages. Before Daniel, there had been a man named Thomas who died in a car accident brake failure on a mountain road. Helen had collected $2 million. After Daniel, there had been Richard, who died from a medication interaction allergy pills mixed with blood pressure medication that Helen had accidentally given him in the wrong dosage. Another $3 million. Helen had murdered 3 husbands over 30 years, collecting approximately $10 million in insurance payouts. She'd moved between different states, used slightly different names, and ensured that no one connected the deaths or suspected a pattern. The journal also detailed something more disturbing: Helen's obsession with controlling Marcus's life. She'd driven away his high school girlfriend by sending anonymous letters to the girl's parents claiming Marcus was violent. She'd sabotaged his college relationship by creating fake evidence of cheating. She'd interfered in his friendships, his career choices, anything that might make him independent from her. Our marriage had been the longest relationship Marcus had maintained despite Helen's interference, which is why she'd needed 3 years of systematic manipulation to destroy it. She couldn't just drive me away overtly. Marcus was too invested, too in love initially. So she'd gone underground, using the anonymous emails to slowly poison him against me. And Olivia wasn't random. Helen had researched Marcus's company, identified single women in professional positions who might be suitable, then deliberately befriended Olivia 2 years ago. She'd cultivated the friendship, learned Olivia's background, discovered she was recently divorced and vulnerable, then systematically positioned her as the perfect alternative to me. Helen had been playing matchmaker and homewrecker simultaneously, all while pretending to care about our marriage. But the journal revealed something even darker. Helen's notes about phase 3 of her plan. Once Marcus divorces Alexandra and marries Olivia, begin cultivating Olivia's trust. Take out a life insurance policy on Marcus. He trusts me to handle financial paperwork. In 2 to 3 years, stage an accident similar to Daniel's, collect insurance. Marcus's assets will also transfer to me as next of kin if Olivia is updated as beneficiary in time. Estimated total payout, $8 to $12 million. Helen wasn't just destroying my marriage to install someone she preferred. She was setting up her own son to be murdered. She was going to kill Marcus for insurance money, just like she'd killed 3 husbands. Olivia was just a temporary placeholder, someone who'd eventually be framed or manipulated into looking guilty. After Marcus's accidental death, I sat in front of that laptop for hours, reading and rereading Helen's journal, trying to process the scope of her evil. My mother-in-law wasn't just manipulative or controlling, she was a serial killer who'd been operating for decades, and my husband was her next target. I needed to save Marcus's life, needed to expose Helen, needed to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else, but I also needed proof that would hold up legally. The journal was detailed, but Helen could claim it was fiction, creative writing, not actual confessions. I needed more. I started by hiring a private investigator named Diana who specialized in cold cases and suspicious deaths. I gave her the names of Helen's previous husbands, the dates of their deaths, and Helen's journal. Diana's eyes widened as she read. If even half of this is true, your mother-in-law is a serial killer, Diana said. But proving murders from decades ago is going to be difficult. Evidence degrades, witnesses die or forget, and cases are closed. We need current evidence of criminal intent. She's planning to kill my husband after she destroys our marriage, I said. That's pretty current. Then we need to catch her in the act of planning it. Documentation, recordings, something concrete that proves intent. I also contacted a forensic digital analyst who helped me trace the anonymous email account Helen had used. The IP addresses, the metadata, the patterns all pointed back to Helen's home computer and phone. We documented everything, created a comprehensive evidence package. Then, I did something dangerous. I responded to Helen's anonymous emails as if I were Marcus. I created a new email account that looked like it could be Marcus's personal account, and I sent a message to email protected. Mom, you're right about the divorce. I'm going to ask Alexandra for one this week. But I need to talk to you about the financial implications and making sure I'm protected. Can we meet? Helen responded within an hour. Of course, darling. Come to my house tomorrow evening. We'll discuss everything, including your future with Olivia. I wired myself with a recording device Diana provided and went to Helen's house the next evening, pretending to be the broken wife seeking advice. Helen welcomed me with a hug and concerned questions. Alexandra, dear, you look exhausted. Is Marcus still being difficult? He wants a divorce, I said, letting my voice crack. He told me last night, said he's been unhappy for years, that we're not compatible, that he's found someone who understands him better. Helen made sympathetic noises while pouring tea, but I saw the triumph in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. I'm so sorry. That must be devastating. Did you know, I asked, about Olivia? I've met her a few times, Helen admitted carefully. She does seem well suited to Marcus. Sometimes these things happen. Dear, people outgrow each other. You don't think I should fight for my marriage? Fighting rarely works when someone's already decided, Helen said. It might be more dignified to accept the situation gracefully. Marcus will respect you more if you don't make things difficult. She was coaching me to give up, to make her plan easier. I played along, nodding, pretending to accept her advice while the recording device captured every word. Then I said, I found something on Marcus's computer. Emails from someone encouraging him to divorce me. Anonymous emails going back years. Do you know anything about that? Helen's expression didn't change, but I saw her hand tighten on her teacup. That sounds odd. What did the emails say? They told him I was holding him back, that Olivia would be better for him, that he should divorce me and be with her instead. I paused, watching her carefully. The emails mentioned you, said you'd been cultivating a friendship with Olivia specifically for Marcus. That's ridiculous, Helen said. But her voice was too controlled. Why would I do that? I don't know. Why would you? I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots of the emails. This is your email address, your IP address, your computer. Helen stared at the screen, and I watched her calculate. She could deny, could claim her account was hacked, could play the victim. Or she could do what narcissists often do when confronted with undeniable evidence, try to justify it. She chose justification. Alexandra, you have to understand, Marcus is my son. I know what's best for him. And you're sweet, but you're not the right partner for someone at his level. I've spent years watching you hold him back from his potential. So you decided to destroy our marriage. I decided to help him see the truth. He was too attached to you to recognize it himself. So I provided guidance. The emails were just helping him process feelings he already had. And Olivia is perfect for him. Successful, sophisticated, ambitious. The kind of woman who will support his growth rather than limit it. I've been preparing her to be his wife because I knew eventually Marcus would need someone better. Better than me, yes, Helen said simply. Better than you. I let the silence hang for a moment, then said, what happens after they get married? After Olivia becomes the new wife? Something flashed in Helen's eyes. Calculation. Fear. They'll be happy together. Will they? I found something else. Helen. A journal. Details about Daniel's death. And Thomas before him. And Richard. All the insurance money you collected. All the accidents that weren't accidents. Helen's face went completely blank. I don't know what you're talking about. You've been planning to kill Marcus after he marries Olivia, to collect more insurance money. He's not your son to you, he's a payday you've been cultivating for 30 years. That's insane, Helen said, but her voice shook. You're making up stories because you're angry about the divorce. Am I? I pulled out more printed pages from my bag, excerpts from her journal that I'd photographed. This is your handwriting, your detailed plans, your confession to 3 murders, and your blueprint for a 4th. Helen stared at the papers, and I watched her face cycle through emotions. Then, finally, something cold and cruel settled over her features. The mask dropped completely. You stupid girl, she said, her voice completely different, no more maternal warmth, just ice. You think you've won. Even if any of this were true, you can't prove it. Those deaths were decades ago. Daniel's fire was ruled accidental. Thomas's car crash was a brake failure. Richard's medication interaction was a tragic mistake. There's no evidence, no witnesses, no way to prove anything. There's your journal. Your confession. A journal isn't a legal confession. I could claim it's fiction, therapeutic writing, anything. And even if someone believed you, Marcus never would. He loves me. He trusts me. He'll think you're making wild accusations to save your marriage. Maybe, I said. Or maybe when I show him proof that you've been sending those emails for 3 years, systematically manipulating him, grooming another woman to replace his wife, and planning to eventually kill him for insurance money, maybe he'll see you for what you really are. Helen laughed, but it was bitter. You really think Marcus will choose you over me? I'm his mother. I raised him. I've been the one constant in his life. You're just a wife he's already decided to divorce. Who do you think he'll believe? Let's find out, I said. That's when Marcus walked in from the hallway where he'd been listening to the entire conversation, recording everything on his phone per our plan. Helen's face went white. Marcus, I heard everything. Mom, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Every word, the emails, the manipulation, the journal. Alexandra showed me everything before we came here. We set this up so I could hear you admit it directly, sweetheart. She's twisting things. You sent me hundreds of emails, pretending to be a life coach. You spent 3 years convincing me to hate my wife. You groomed another woman to replace her, and you murdered my father. Marcus's voice broke. You murdered him when I was 5 years old. Everything I remember about the fire, the tragedy, you comforting me, you killed him. How could you? I did it for us. Helen's composure was shattered. Your father was weak, unmotivated. We were better off without him. The money gave us opportunities. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to give you the best life possible. You were planning to kill me next, Marcus said flatly. For insurance money. After you destroyed my marriage and set me up with Olivia. I would never. We have your journal, Mom, your detailed plans, your confession. Helen looked between us, trapped, and I saw the moment she realized she'd lost. Her face transformed into something ugly, hateful. You ungrateful bastard. After everything I've done, every sacrifice I made, and you choose this mediocre woman over your own mother. You're not a mother, Marcus said. You're a monster wearing a mother's skin. Diana stepped out from where she'd been hiding with the police. Detective, both of them had heard Helen's confession, recorded everything, witnessed her admissions. Helen Blake, Detective Sarah Chen said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and we'll be reopening the cases of Daniel Blake, Thomas Morrison, and Richard Castellano as suspected homicides. Helen's arrest made national headlines within days. Mother accused of murdering 3 husbands, planning to kill her own son. The investigation moved quickly once authorities had Helen's journal and her recorded confession. They exhumed Daniel's body and found traces of accelerant in his lung tissue that the original fire investigation had missed. Thomas's car was found in a salvage yard, and forensic examination revealed the brake line had been deliberately cut, not worn through by age. Richard's death was harder to prove, but Helen's journal detailed exactly how she'd mixed his medications to create a fatal interaction. The prosecution built a devastating case. 3 proven murders, 1 conspiracy to commit murder, Marcus, decades of insurance fraud, and evidence of systematic psychological abuse and manipulation. The trial lasted for months. I testified about the emails, the manipulation of my marriage, and Helen's grooming of Olivia as my replacement. Marcus testified about discovering his father had been murdered, about the years of his mother's controlling behavior that he'd dismissed as overprotectiveness, about the horror of realizing he'd been marked as her next victim. Olivia testified to Helen had befriended her 2 years ago at a charity event, had cultivated the relationship carefully, had fed her information about Marcus's job, his interests, his marital problems. Olivia had thought Helen was just a kind older woman offering mentorship. She had no idea she was being positioned as a replacement wife for a man Helen planned to eventually murder. The defense tried to argue that Helen suffered from mental illness, that her journal was a fantasy, that the confessions we'd recorded were taken out of context, but the prosecution presented forensic evidence. Financial records showing $10 million in insurance payouts from 3 dead husbands, and the recordings where Helen explicitly admitted to murder. The jury convicted her on all counts. 3 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and a dozen other charges. The sentencing phase was where I delivered my real revenge. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I did. I stood in front of the court and looked directly at Helen. You spent 3 years systematically destroying my marriage. You sent hundreds of emails manipulating my husband into hating me. You groomed another woman to replace me. You turned mother-in-law into a term that means betrayal and evil. But that's not even the worst thing you did. I paused, making sure Helen was looking at me. You murdered 3 men who trusted you. You planned to murder your own son for insurance money. You turned love into a weapon and family into a business opportunity. You're not a mother. You're a predator who uses maternal love as camouflage. But here's what you didn't anticipate. You made me stronger. You thought I was weak, easy to break, someone who'd just give up when faced with your manipulation. You were wrong. I found your emails. I discovered your journal. I exposed your murders. I saved Marcus's life. I'm the reason you're in that orange jumpsuit, facing life in prison. Helen's face was twisted with rage, but she couldn't speak, could only listen as I destroyed her. The judge is going to sentence you today. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and you'll die there, alone. Forgotten by the son you tried to kill, and despised by everyone who knows what you are. That's the legacy you've built, not devoted mother, but serial killer. Not family matriarch, but monster. The judge sentenced Helen to 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, plus 75 additional years for the other charges. She'd die in prison, and there was no amount of time served that would ever make her eligible for release. But I wasn't done with Helen, because prison felt too easy. She'd get meals, medical care, potentially books and television, and human contact. I wanted her to suffer the way her victims had suffered, the way Marcus had suffered, from discovering his mother was a murderer, the way Daniel had suffered burning to death in a basement. So I spent the next year systematically destroying every aspect of Helen's life beyond the legal consequences. In Helen's first month in prison, I made sure every media outlet had the full story with the most damning details. I gave exclusive interviews describing her manipulation, her murders, and her plans to kill Marcus. I provided photos of Daniel, Thomas, and Richard, the men she'd murdered, making sure they were humanized, not just statistics. I worked with their surviving family members to file wrongful death civil suits against Helen's estate. The courts seized all of Helen's assets to pay restitution to the victims' families. The insurance money she'd collected was forfeit. Her house was sold. Every penny she'd accumulated through murder was taken away, distributed to the families she'd destroyed. I also made sure Helen's prison experience was as uncomfortable as legally possible. I contacted victims' rights organizations, got connected with advocacy groups inside the prison system. Word spread quickly among inmates about why Helen was there. She demurdered 3 husbands and planned to kill her own son for money. Prisoners have their own justice system for certain crimes. People who hurt children, people who kill for greed, people who betray family bonds, they don't fare well. Helen lasted 6 weeks in the general population before she was attacked by 3 women whose children had been taken by the state due to their own crimes. They saw Helen as a monster who'd hurt her own son and decided to deliver justice. She ended up with a broken jaw, fractured ribs, and permanent scarring on her face where one inmate had used a homemade weapon. After the attack, Helen was moved to protective custody, basically solitary confinement for her own safety. 23 hours a day in a cell, 6 feet by 8 feet, 1 hour for recreation alone in a cage. No human contact except guards passing food through a slot. That's where Helen would spend the rest of her life. Not in relative comfort with other prisoners, but in complete isolation, her mind slowly deteriorating from the lack of stimulation and human interaction. I sent her a letter 2 months into her solitary confinement. The only communication I've ever sent her since her arrest. Helen, I wanted you to know that Marcus and I renewed our vows last month. Our marriage is stronger than ever now, that your poison has been removed from it. We're happy, thriving, building the life you tried to destroy. Olivia came to the ceremony. She's become a good friend, grateful I exposed your manipulation before you could destroy her life too. Your son doesn't think about you anymore except as a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. He's in therapy, processing the trauma of having a serial killer for a mother, but he's healing. He changed his last name legally. He's no longer a Blake. He wanted no connection to you whatsoever. I hope every hour in that cell feels like an eternity. I hope the isolation drives you slowly insane. I hope you live a long, long time in there, with nothing but your thoughts and the knowledge that you lost everything. You tried to destroy me, and instead, I destroyed you. You thought you were smarter, more ruthless, more capable of manipulation. You were wrong. The anonymous emails you sent destroyed our marriage temporarily. Consider this letter your permanent reminder of what happens when someone underestimates the woman you tried to break. You'll die alone in a cage, and when you do, no one will mourn. Marcus won't come to your funeral. Your name will be synonymous with evil. And I'll be living the beautiful life with your son that you tried so hard to prevent. Enjoy solitary confinement. You've earned every second of it. Marcus and I renewed our vows. He'd been horrified when he realized how thoroughly his mother had manipulated him, how close he'd come to destroying our marriage based on her poisonous influence. We went to intensive couples therapy, worked through the damage Helen had caused, and rebuilt our trust and intimacy. It took 2 years before we felt stable enough to truly move forward, but we did. Stronger, more aware, more grateful for each other than we'd been before. We also started a foundation to help people identify and escape from family members with dangerous personality disorders. We provide resources for recognizing manipulation, legal support for victims of domestic abuse, and counseling for people recovering from relationships with narcissists and sociopaths. Olivia became one of our closest friends. She'd been horrified to discover she'd been groomed as my replacement, that Helen had been using her as a pawn in a murder plot. She joined our foundation as a board member, helping other women recognize when they're being manipulated. 5 years after Helen's conviction, I got a letter from the prison. Helen had suffered a major stroke likely brought on by the stress of solitary confinement and the years of isolation. She'd survived but was permanently paralyzed on one side, could barely speak, and needed assistance with basic functions. The prison doctor asked if our family would consider paying for enhanced medical care or potentially having Helen moved to a medical facility with better resources. I wrote back, no, she has access to the standard medical care provided to all inmates, nothing more. She showed no mercy to the men she murdered, and planned no mercy for the son she was going to kill. She deserves exactly the care the state provides, and nothing beyond that. Helen lived another 3 years after the stroke. Those years spent in the prison medical ward, partially paralyzed, unable to speak clearly, her mind deteriorating from the stroke damage and the continued isolation. She died alone at age 68, and per her son's request, was cremated with no funeral, no memorial, no marker. Marcus refused to claim her ashes. They were disposed of by the prison as unclaimed remains. Helen had spent her life collecting insurance money from murdered husbands, building wealth through death, and maintaining control through manipulation. She'd thought herself untouchable, brilliant, too smart to ever be caught. Instead, she died broke, alone, imprisoned, paralyzed, and forgotten. The woman who thought she could destroy my marriage by sending anonymous emails ended up losing everything: her freedom, her health, her son, her money, her reputation, and finally, her life, in that order. Marcus sometimes asks if I feel guilty about how far I took the revenge, about ensuring Helen's prison experience was as brutal as possible, about refusing enhanced medical care, about the letter I sent taunting her in solitary confinement. I don't feel guilty at all, because Helen had murdered 3 people, had planned to murder her own son, had spent decades perfecting her predatory skills, hurting countless people, destroying lives without remorse. She'd sent me anonymous emails for 3 years, trying to destroy my marriage so she could eventually murder my husband for insurance money. I found the emails, traced them back to her, exposed 3 murders, saved Marcus's life, made sure she spent her final years suffering in ways that mirrored the suffering she'd inflicted on others. Some people call that excessive. I call it justice. Helen wanted to push me out and replace me with someone she'd chosen, someone who'd be easier to manipulate while she executed her plan to murder Marcus. Instead, I pushed her into a prison cell where she died paralyzed and alone, her legacy not as a devoted mother but as a serial killer who died unmourned. The anonymous emails were supposed to destroy me. Instead, they became evidence that destroyed her. And I'll never regret ensuring that destruction was complete, permanent, and painful. Helen thought she was the predator. She was wrong. She was just prey who didn't realize she'd been caught until it was far too late to escape.